Oh, here we are again. Another series in somewhat real time. Making a kilt box pleated to the red stripe and a shoulder blade, a dress shoulder blade for this gentleman. So I'll be able to get in the episodes that I messed up and wasn't able to post in that previous series on making a kilt in real time. Um, this is a lovely tartan. This was designed by the client. He spent his first part of his life on an island up the coast, a couple of 100 kilometers up the coast. And I can't remember if he started with a set with a design that had some family connections or not, but the color palette is entirely inspired by his childhood spending on the seashore of that particular island. And having spent fair part of my life on the coast as well, I can see kelp, and I can see, I can see I can see the thought processes and the associations that he has, and it's quite wonderful. And again, once again, this is why I do business with Dalglish, because DT Dalglish, the mill, because they will weave anything. And even whether you're changing the color of a established tartan, or if you've designed a whole new tartan, and their minimum order is only 4 meters, which is, it's expensive, but who else does that? It's tremendous. So this customer designed his own tartan with colors and a pattern that are deeply significant to him, and now I'm going to turn it into a kilt. So I unrolled the cloth. I refreshed my memory from his file. So we have a 36 waist, 42 hip, 9-inch fell, 23-inch total length, box pleated to the red stripe, and he wants chrome buckles and black straps. So there's my 2 chrome buckles. That's the incorrect strap, but it reminds me what he wants. I'll cut the straps a bit later. So box pleated. Okay. Right, so let's get on it. So the first thing I've done is 36 waist. Well, I start at 50-50, so 36 is 18 and 18. But again, I'm trained as an army kilt maker, so I want a wider apron. I prefer a wider apron. So initially, I'm going to go to a 19-inch apron and a 17-inch across the back, across the pleats. So the apron is going to be 19 at the waist, 20 at the hip. The pleats are going to be 17 at the waist, 22 at the hip. Let's find out how that's all going to go. So, got my sharpened bits of chalk. Yep, they're sharp. Actually, let's just give that, and just for appearance's sake, I'm doing it within the camera, because usually I'd step outside the door to do this. Some future archaeologist is going to wonder mightily about these curious shavings of wax chalk, which he will find in the soil. Yeah. Okay, that was a bad idea. I might have knocked that thing out of adjustment. Well, we'll find out. Okay. Right, so we're pleating to the red stripe. He's also asked that the apron be centered on the red stripe. And if he hadn't asked that, I would be suggesting that to him, because it's a sort of symmetry that we expect to see. So the first thing I'm going to do is, well, I choose this red stripe for starters. Let's start with the 20 inches at the waist, at the hip. And I'm just setting it out there. 20 inches is there. I've got well more than a handspan. So this is, in fact, this is the logical place to be the center of the front apron. If I'd done it there, you can see I've got 3 inches. If I do it over here, I'm wasting cloth. So there we go. So this will be the center of the apron. I've made a mark. 23 inches, right? 23. You can't see it, but there's some very, very fine blocks and lines here in the brown. Um, it may not show up very well in this light, but the top of the kilt comes exactly to that transition between green and brown. So there's the top of the kilt. We measure down 2.5 inches because that just seems to be the standard for an adult male. And 19 at the waist. So 19, half a 19th is 9.5. And if you're looking, you can see I've already made my marks. I'm cheating a little bit. And 19 on this side. There we are. And 19 on this side. There we go. So there's top of the kilt, center of the strap and buckle, measuring down 9 inches. Now it's within 3/8 of an inch of this yellow line, so I'm just backing up that much just because it'll be just so much easier than working on it later. And that's a small cheat, but I think it's an acceptable cheat. So 10 inches and 10 inches. Okay, there's my front apron chalked out. Let's get that pencil out of the way. Now we're going to be pleating to the red stripe. Eventually a kilt is going to come along that I'll be pleating it to the set, and then you'll get to see how I do that. Okay, so there's the edge of the kilt. If I go to the nearest red line, that's ridiculously small apron pleat. I go to the second red line. You can't see it, but there's the edge of the pleat. The apron pleat is right there. So that's a little over 1/3. There's the center line, there's the edge of the kilt, there's the width of the deep pleat. Frankly, it's, again, between 1/4 and 1/3, or even more, frankly. I don't want it less than 1/4. I don't want it more than half. I don't want it more than halfway. If I was working with a tartan that's so very large that it was necessary to have such a deep pleat that it came to the halfway, I'd have to think of what to do, whether I put a box pleat in there to reduce it or something, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay, so anyhow, this is going to be my first pleat. So I've marked it again. You can never see it. I've already marked it with a couple of X's. And I know that's the top of the apron, or top of the kilt, that feature there. So I've marked down 2.5 inches, marked to the center, grabbed my leather strap gauge, lined it up on the center, marked the outside, did the same thing here, marked the outside. Now let's get this stuff out of the way. I'm a bit overdressed right now, but I was coming home from the day job and the weather looked fine. I was on my bicycle and I was just far enough away from work and the heavens just opened on me. I was drenched to the skin. It was like a monsoon. So I gave myself a brisk toweling when I got home, but I'm a little bit overdressed now because that was a bit of a chill. Okay, there's the outside apron. There's the first and second pleat, right on. Let's go to the other end of the cloth. Right, so once again, top of the kilt is there. Now 19, remember I tend to make the inner apron a little bit wider so that we don't pinch. The strap and the buckle doesn't pinch the customer on the left hip. So if I go center on this stripe, you can see it's a little less than a handspan. So I want it, this is going to be 19, but I'm going to extend it by 1/2 inch or maybe even a full inch. I can probably call it 20. So there's not quite enough there. If I go there, I'm wasting cloth a little bit there, aren't I? So I'm going to strike. The inside apron doesn't have to be a mirror image, an exact image of the outside. So I'm going to skip 1/2 a set. And I'm going to go to this yellow line. And then, see, now that gives me a full hand span. Remember this is my master hand, so that my stretch, my full hand span is close to an inch wider than my right hand. why that matters. But there. And that gives me about 2 inches on the end that I can rip off later to add to the fringe on the outer apron, should I choose. I might be able to get it all from the other side, I don't know yet. But there we are. Okay, so I've marked top of kilt, strap and buckle. I've marked the 20 inches down at the widest part of the seat. And now, same thing again. If I go 1, well, it's about a quarter, but it's only just about a quarter. Let's go a second one. And this one's, hang on, let's actually do that right. Again, that's pretty deep. That's getting close to the center. But I really can't split the difference. I can't go there, right? That's too shallow. That's actually kind of optimum, but I can't. If I was to bring the last pleat to here, we'd have uneven pleat widths across the back, and nobody would see it when you're looking at the outside of the kilt, but it would sure as hell bother me looking at on the inside of the kilt, and I'm sure it would attract the customer's attention too, and not in a good way. So there we are. This is very nearly 50%. It's very nearly at the center apron. I may reduce that by making it into a box pleat later on, but so far, or a bellows pleat, so far I'm not going to worry about it. But there we are. So then I've marked my meeting place, is that what we called it last time? With a single arrow to show that that's not a pleat, but that's where the last pleat comes to. And I've marked my first pleat, sorry, my last pleat, I've marked with a chalk X. Now, let's count how many pleats we're going to have. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Well, that's fortunate because it's an odd number of pleats. And again, remember, we want an odd number of pleats if we can possibly help it, because we want that center back pleat, right? Great, 25 pleats. So I pull out my handy dandy table of pleat widths, most commonly used in kilt making, which I hope that you've written up your own one if you followed that earlier tutorial about this whole exercise of calculating pleat widths, because it's such a time saver. And even if you're doing one kilt and never intend to do another kilt, I encourage you to do this exercise anyway, because it's especially if you're working on your first kilt and you're kind of overwhelmed by the whole process, if you've got a table of numbers that you can consult, that you can trust, you're golden. Okay, so 25. Now, I don't expect you to be able to see this on the camera, but 25 pleats, well, and number of pleats and the widths, well, half would be 12 and a half. So what are we again? We are 17 inches at the waist, 22 inches on the hip. So let's just follow our finger down the table. A pleat that's 7/8 of an inch wide will give us a total coverage of 21 7/8. That's only an 1/8 inch short, right? That's 21 7/8. That's, an insignificant difference. So there we go. So we know, okay, now the pleat width at the hip is going to be 7/8. I'm scrolling up a little bit. I want 17 inches at the waist. 5/8 is 16 7/8. Which, again, is only an 1/8 of an inch out, which is immaterial, particularly when we remember that we've got the fringe on the outside of the right apron, which is going to, I won't say hide a multitude of sins, but it gives us a bit of wiggle room. So there we are. That was quite straightforward. So 5/8 at the waist, or sorry, wrong. yeah, 5/8 at the waist, 7/8 at the hip. And if I wanted to split the difference a little bit, if I wanted to be more exact, were I to split the difference, should I add a 16th? So 5/8, okay, 15 and 5/8, 15 and 5/8. If I wanted to split that difference, I'd count in 16ths. So 5/8, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 25. That's 17 and 3/16. So we have a choice between slightly less and ever so slightly over. I'm going to go with slightly less because the difference between, a 1/16 of an inch of a difference in pleat width, granted, it accumulates. We have to be constant, because if I get sloppy, errors tend to compound, right? But I'm going to stick with that 5/8 and wind up with wrong. Yeah. Oh, that's funny. That is hilarious. I've been looking at the wrong column. This is why it's valuable really to have this chart. I am going to have to split that difference because 5/8 only comes to 15 and 5/8. 11/16 comes to 17 and 3/16. So that's what we're going to go with. So 11/16, and the way I sort of record that in shorthand, I'll call that 5/8 plus. 5/8 plus will give us 11/16, 22 inches at the hip, or sorry, 7/8 of the hip will give us 22, bang on the money, or at least a 1/6 of an eighth of an inch short. Cool. Great. Now I'm going to dig out my guides. Just make sure that they're not sitting here from the last job. There's a 5/8. That one's marked 11/16. 15ths. That's 3/4. 9/16. 15/16. 3/4. 7/8. There we go. Okay, cool. I was just looking at this packet of needles. Abel Morrell's newly invented egg-eyed darners, made in England, 1 shilling and 5 pence. Okay, I won't say that's older than me, because I remember when decimal currency came in and replaced the old pounds, shillings, and pence. But that's a seriously old group of needles. Okay, remember the next thing I'm going to do is, actually wrong. 2 things. Let's take a look at these gauges and let's double check to see. Seven, 8. Okay. From this gauge, I'm going to be measuring at the hip. The hip is there. I'm going to be measuring. What did it come to? 7/8 at 25. I'm going to be measuring to the inside of the chalk there. Great, so that's fine. Now this is marked as 11/16. I'm just doing a test here. What does this come to? This comes to okay, if I measure that to the inside of the chalk, that comes to precisely 11/16. Yeah. Let's measure this one as well. This one's marked 5/8. And again, if I measure, that's wild. If I measure to the outside of the chalk on this one, it comes to 11/16. So let's look at those again. Yeah, inside of the chalk. I tend to instinctively move to the inside of the chalk, so I think I'll go with the one that's marked 11/16 because there's less chance of me making a mistake. I mean, I've already caught myself making one mistake already in this kilt, and I'm not horribly ashamed of that, because when I catch myself doing like that, something like that, it wakens me up a little bit, right? So remember the last thing, this is going to be the center of the apron, so I'm going to mark there to remind myself later that when I'm using this as a top band. Let's take a look at these pleats before I start ripping. There's the top of the kilt there. Let's line it up on the red. Okay, this is good because I'm not sure if you can see it, but the client specified box pleated on the red stripe, but with that pleat break, or the width breakdown between, what do we say, 11/16 waist, 7/8 hip, the pleats are still wide enough that you can see the black on either side of it. If these had wound up being so narrow, and by so narrow I mean, wow, 3/8 of an inch. And frankly, 3/8 is about as narrow as I can really sew a pleat. It gets a little problematic after that. But these, when I do narrower than that, but these mean that each pleat is going to have a show of black on either side. I think guarded is the expression that's used when a line is flanked by a darker line on its other side. We would call that red guarded with black. So that black is going to be clearly visible at the hip and at the waist. We don't have to fear the color vanishing into the seam, because that's absolutely verboten. Now what I'm going to do before I rip the top, because again, remember, this is going to be a box pleat. I'm just going to go to the other end for a minute and remind myself, okay, there's the last pleat. I'm just going to make a few more marks, because if you've seen my other videos on making box pleats, the very first and the very last pleats will be sewn and pressed and sewn as knife pleats. And the reason for that is, if you over the years working with Army kilts for close to 50 years now, I've noticed that box pleat kilts, when they're sewn as box pleats first to last, the two outside pleats tend to, with wear and use, they tend to reconfigure themselves into knife pleats. So somebody else, another kilt maker, I certainly didn't, I noticed it, but I'm not the first to implement it, because somebody else in the Army kilt making world, I noticed I was getting kilts coming to me for alteration and repair where the first and last pleats had been pressed and sewn right from the get-go as knife pleats. So that's going to be my knife pleat. There's going to be my first box pleat. So before I tear this top off, I'm going to chalk these for their widths, because I'm going to do something different this time. In the past, you remember, I've folded and then basted the box pleats in position, at least folded the first crease and then basted it and then pressed it like that, because then later on you'd be sewing the seam and then basting it and then pressing it. When working with very narrow pleats, and again, Army a standard C4 kilt, the upper end of the pleat is generally close to 3/8 of an inch. And again, that's very tight. And if I've been the least bit careless, or if the cloth has moved, despite how careful I've been, and the cloth has been pressed a little bit wider, it produces a really uneven looking appearance. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to try something new for the first time, in that I'm going to mark these and baste them, but I'm only going to baste them up to the bottom of the fell, and that is going to be, remember, kilt's 23 inches, which is there. We marked the fell as 9 inches, but then I backed it up, remember? So that's the bottom of the fell. So what I'm going to do is, when I baste these and then press them before I start sewing them, I'm only going to baste and press a little bit past the bottom of the fell. Let's say right about there, thumb width, an inch or so. And then when I'm sewing the kilt, this won't be pressed into the box. So below this, it's going to be pressed for the box pleat. Above, we're going to sew it as though it was a knife pleat. And this is a little bit of an experiment. Let's see how it turns out. Okay. Next step then. Okay. What I'm going to do, I mean, I can do it by eye, and I trust myself to do it by eye, but let's just take that extra moment and have that extra step. Now remember, this one isn't going to be, it's going to be a knife pleat rather than a box pleat, so I'm just marking the that way. But from here, this is pleat number 2. Okay, that was right out. It was very poorly done. Let's do that again. Okay. See if I can do this. Just occurred to me, there's no point in me chalking above the line here, because when I press this, that chalk line is going to disappear. So let's save a bit of chalk. That whole left-right thing. This probably isn't the best angle for the camera, is it? I'll just be right-handed temporarily here. Yeah, that's working. Oops, yeah, that was a bit cocked up. You know, let's pretend that you're watching me do the next 20 odd, because there's what, 25 pleats in this? Yeah. Let's fast forward and pretend that I've chalked all of these while you've been watching. Because there's my last pleat. Now remember, it's going to be a knife pleat, and it's going to be basted and pressed as a knife pleat. I'll work back. Okay. Okay. Just because the bit is between my teeth, actually I'm going to think for a bit. Am I going to start basting? It would actually be a good idea, wouldn't it? Because do you remember I do all my chalking, I do all my striking before I reduce the cloth to its finished length, top to the bottom of the kilt. Oh, and here's a big thing. Always remember, you've got, if you're using proper kilt cloth, stuff made by Dalglish, you've got the kilting selvage. You got, one selvage is slightly better than the other. This is the less good. This is the best phase. And the reason why I emphasize that is I had a friend of mine who was learning kilt making. He's a pretty good one now, but he and I will never forget the time that he tore the wrong end off. So he has a kilt with the slightly less than perfect edge on the bottom of his kilt, and he's never forgotten it. I don't think I'm ever going to forget it either. So, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start basting the first. There's the needle. Here's a bit of thread. Again, this is a bit of an experiment. Let's see how it turns out. I may have to publicly eat humble pie if it doesn't turn out, but not really, because time spent in experimentation, right? I mean, if you're working to a crisis deadline, then that's not the best time to be footing around with new ideas, perhaps. But we're good to go with this. So no, let's have that just handy. Yeah. See, if I bring this over, there's my chalk line. If I bring it over, you can't see it, but it looks like the middle, the inner crease is going to be about there because I'm bringing this over. It's a little bit past. I thought I could just bring it over to that line between the blue and the brown, but it's actually, maybe I will, because if I've laid that flat to bring this yellow line down to, like, it almost looks like a white line there that I've chalked, but that brings the center crease to about the middle of the pleat, and that's actually pretty optimum. Okay, how's that looking? That's looking good. I think what I'm going to do, is I will press, I'm going to baste and then press all of these before I reduce the total length. So that this means, because I'll be flipping the cloth back and forth, and if I don't have a raw edge here, I won't be losing yarns, right? And again, Dalglish cloth is so very good that it doesn't shed yarns the way that some inferior cloth does, but you're going to lose a few in any case. So as you can see, my chalk marks are there, but I'm kind of feeling it also. I'm feeling where that inner crease is, and it's at about the center of the red line. I can feel it. And if I keep that up, this will be successful. There we are. Get in there. there is a tendency to make these inadvertently a bit pie-shaped, so particularly down towards the end of the cloth, the bottom of the kilt. Okay, back stitch, and there's the first one. I think I'll do one more. Now, this cloth, if I keep folding it here, it's eventually going to spill over and land on the floor. So I think what I'm going to do, just to keep better control of it, is right now I'm going to start rolling it. Okay, 1, 2, 23 pleats to go. Yeah. Right. Pleat number 3. Bring it over. And let's do a couple of back stitches because it wants to get away from me there, because all of this, which isn't basted down, is kind of tugging at the cloth, right? So look at that, it's nearly supper time. We'll get a couple more of these done. Ouch. Yeah, ran the needle into my finger again. And again, it can get tricky down here because it's easy to get it wrong. But it's important that you don't allow it to stay wrong. Okay. It's a bit dimpled there. I just flattened it out. So, okay, 3 down. 22 more to go. I'm going to leave you at this point because none but the most sleep deprived will really benefit from watching me just doing this metronomic sort of thing. So I'm going to leave you now. I'll check back in with you when I'm ready to press this, and then from pressing and drying we'll be ripping the top and getting to work on the kilt. So stay safe. Talk to you soon.